podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Man there trying to stop Drogba getting himself into further trouble.
It's a fucking disgrace.
Oh, it's not a bad ball for Pele on the right side. It's Carlos Alberto. Oh, what a great goal that was! Carlos Alberto.
Maradona just walked away from Huddle then. Saldano, smokes and Maradona! They're appealing for offside. The ball came back off the foot of Steve Hodge. And Maradona gives Argentina the lead. The England players protesting to the referee.
De halve finale komen. Ik heb opeens zo'n gevoel dat we in de halve finale gaan komen. Met het balbezit voor Frank de Boer. Frank de Boer speelt de bal. Heel goed naar Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp neemt de bal aan. Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp. Oh! Frank de Boer speelt de bal naar Dennis Bergkamp. Die neemt de bal feilloos aan. En die schiet de bal erin.
So welcome to the podcast this week. I'm delighted to be joined by Shaul Adar, who has written a brilliant book called On the Border, The Rise and Decline of the Most Political Club in the World about Beitar Jerusalem. Shaul, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Shaul, before we get deep into the story of Beitar, it might be useful for our listeners to maybe know a little bit about your background and also what led you to look into writing this book.
Yeah, I was born in Israel, in Beersheba, in the desert. Became a journalist in the early 90s. Not just football, but a lot about football and sport. Was deputy editor of a sport magazine, which was based in Jerusalem, and I lived there and worked for many years in the city. And I moved to London in 2000, and this is my third book. My second book was about my team, Hapoel Beersheva, and the golden period that we had or having. And when I finished it, I was thinking, what should I write next? And I thought the obvious choice was Beitar, not for the Israeli public, but for the international public, because the story engulfed not just the team, but the city and Israeli history and Israeli society. And I don't think any other team does it better than Beitar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I really enjoyed while reading the book was how, like you said, this sort of history of Israel is so linked to Beitar Jerusalem. Can you explain maybe briefly a little bit like the origins of Beitar and what makes them such a sort of significant club in the fabric both of Israeli football and Israeli society and culture?
Yeah, Beitar was the youth and sport movement of what later became Herut and Likud. So we'll shorthand it for Likud, which is the dominant party of the Israeli politics and the Israeli right for many years. And it started surprisingly as much more liberal movement than they became. They stood up for, rights of the people, of business, and in the manifesto, the leader asked for decent rights and recognition of the Arabs or like Palestinian who should live later alongside Israel, or what would become Israel. The team was formed in 1936, and even in the first lineup, there is one politician who later became a member of the government, a minister. So it shows you how deep are the connections between Beitar and the Likud. But they suffered from discrimination on two grounds. One was geographical. Surprisingly, Jerusalem was not the center of the Zionist establishment or the Zionist living in Israel before it became Israel. I'm talking from after World War I in 1948. it was much more Tel Aviv and the whole region between Tel Aviv and Haifa, if we know the map of Israel. And the second one, Beitar was outsiders to the main two sport organizations, which were Hapoel, who are the socialists, and Maccabi, who were the budding bourgeois of Israeli society. And both cooperated to put Beitar teams, actually Beitar Tel Aviv was the dominant Beitar team, aside and harm them in any possible way. And actually they denied Beitar Tel Aviv a historic championship in 1947 just because they were Beitar. So Beitar Jerusalem had to play against local teams, and many of them were Arab, Armenian, other Jewish teams. So they were very far from the mainstream Israeli football. And even in the 50s and 60s, they were the second best team in Jerusalem after Hapoel Jerusalem. But it helped them in other way. It forged a mentality, an identity, and an energy that anger and resentment was translated into energy that became the most dominant feature of the team. And they gained certain part of the Israeli society behind them, followers of Menachem Begin, of the Likud, who then was in the opposition, people who immigrated from Arab countries into young Israel and were discriminated against in work, politics, and felt betrayed by the young Israeli country. And Beitar grew outside Jerusalem and became, let's say, a hub for people who felt the same. They needed a football success to become a major team, and that only happened in the 70s and 80s. But until then, they forged what is extremely important mentality and identity that, it was worth it in the long run. Other teams can play for dozens of years and, would be important to the own local fans and local community, but nothing more. With Beitar, the early hard years turned them into a national phenomenon.
And why did the sort of group that Beitar sort of drew its support from, why did they feel looked down on, or why by sort of the, like you said, sort of the establishment in Israel?
The people who formed Israel were of socialist tendencies, Ben Gurion and his parties, and very secular. And most of them were of European descent, Ashkenazi, as we call them. And they tend to give job and bring into politics and form coalition with people like them. And the Israeli society was surprisingly very secular and sometimes against religion in the early years, and it had the feelings of the more traditional population of Israel, and they felt like promises were broken when they arrived to Israel and found there's an establishment who didn't respect them and put them in transit camps like all other immigrants. But the other immigrants from Poland, for example, left the camps much earlier and moved into the cities, while others stayed there for much longer, and later this transit camp became the slums of Israel. And so with economic resentment, political one, getting jobs and feeling that they weren't respected, it all helped to form a very strong opposition. And Beitar with Menachem Begin used that feeling very early on, and they had the pleasure of playing against Hapoel Jerusalem, which embodied all those elements of patronizing and closed circuit establishment.
Mm-hmm. And from my reading of the book, it seems very clear that sort of in the 60s and 70s, say, that sort of that violence and that fervor was very much a key aspect of Beitar Jerusalem. Was that exclusive to them, or was that just sort of generally across the culture at that
It
stage?
was in 1967. The league was actually all promotions and relegation, and the title was stopped for 1 year, and we had a season. It was 67 and 68 together because of violence and corruption. So we can see it was a general problem, but with Beitar it was much worse. Look, working on the book, I used the official book of Beitar, and they mentioned violent episodes in the YMCA ground, like, you know, like having a pie.
It's like funny stories about
Yeah,
the goalkeeper running away.
exactly.
And
The opposite goalkeeper lost a free tooth, and it maybe didn't help him perform well. Ha ha ha. And there was truly shocking event in 1969 in Jaffa, in the best ground of Israel, Bloomfield. Uh, Beitar fans stopped the game against Hapoel Tel Aviv and trashed the stadium, burned the goalpost, and chased the referee with machine gun. And the referee, who was immigrant from Russia, had to suffer the abuse of people telling him, "Go back to Russia. It's pity that Hitler didn't finish the job with you." So there were other incidents, but Beitar ones was the worst, and similar another two events happened later when Beitar fans attacked players and referees, and some of them had to hospitalize. So there's no other events like that in Israeli football. They are much minor and relatively peaceful, but with Beitar, they took it to the extreme.
And what was I mean, when these extreme events were happening, it seems that the sort of football establishment or political establishments almost went further than turning a blind eye to it, like actively encouraged it in some ways. Would that be fair to say? Why did they sort of allow this to sort of
The
fester?
FA tried to stop, the Israeli FA
Okay.
tried to stop it and punished them severely. They didn't play in Jerusalem for half a season, the season after it. But actually, with Beitar, got a national fan base bigger than the Jerusalem fan base. It wasn't much of a punishment. It's actually they could get much more money and much more attendance in Tel Aviv or around Tel Aviv. So Beitar get to the FA court almost on a weekly basis and get fines and games behind closed doors forever and ever, and nothing stopped them. I'm sure we'll get to the events of the 2013 later. But I think you're right. Without a national agency or help from the police and the courts, nothing will stop them, and nothing stopped them. I can't say that they didn't turn the blind eye completely, but they took it, as boys will be boys and Beitar will be Beitar. And it just escalated. Later in the 2000s, they enjoyed the political support that made everything much more worse and much harder to eradicate.
And is it safe to say then that in the 70s, the sort of support for Beitar took off both kind of with the success and also with the wider support among the public? Which kind of did one follow the other, or is it simply like the success followed the support?
they had a very good base, but in 75, 76, there was the big shift. For the first time, Beitar had a truly outstanding star in name Uri Malmilian, a boy who grew up in Jerusalem just by the border until 1967, playing football in the streets with his friends under the eyes of Jordanian soldiers and sometimes Jordanian snipers. And he was outstanding and wonderful player and a wonderful person, shy and humble and pleasure to meet and pleasure to play with. I spoke to people who played with him, and although he was much better, he stayed humbled all the time. And he turned Beitar into a decent team who started fighting for titles. In 1976, they won the first cup, which was a major event, and from then on, they became a national phenomenon, was supported all over Israel. And so, and they enjoyed the support of the Likud, who came into power a year later. There are debates how are those things connected. Did Beitar winning the cup help the Likud winning the elections for the first time? It's hard to tell. Symbolically, it's quite obvious that something deep changed in Israel, and the power shifted from the Tel Aviv team into the periphery, and from domination of Hapoel and Maccabi, Beitar started winning themselves. And
You mentioned the growth of the Likud right-wing party and its connection to Beitar. Were the leaders of the Likud who sort of connected themselves and ingrained themselves with Beitar Jerusalem and the fans? Were they genuinely, identifying with the club and the fans of this, or was it more of a opportunistic, typical politician uses football club to gain support kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. The two, we can see, I think I've made a list in the book of how many ministers, chancellors. It was a wonderful stepping stone to be the head of Cherut and Beitar in Jerusalem. From there, you got almost free ride into the Likud party, into the Knesset, into the parliament. So we had many ministers who started as, some of them as players, some of them as chairman of Beitar. We had one president and one prime minister who was actually a true fan and helped the club many times. Beitar always go from in a cycle of boom and bust. So he was there every bust to save them, not always making the right choices with the new Messiah, but he will always try. That was Ehud Olmert. The president was Ruby Rivlin, who is out and out fan without a doubt. Very emotional fan. But in the last decade, we see more and more politicians, and the most obvious one is Benjamin Netanyahu, who used the club as a prop. I doubt if he knows one player in the team. I don't think he's a football fan. He probably just watched the World Cup final game or the Champions League final. There's no reason to believe he's a follower of Israeli football. And then much worse are his cronies and racists and the utter radical racist nationalist neo-fascist Israeli right, who became a prominent feature in the stands, especially when Beitar played against the most well-known Arab team of Sahnin. So there are many true fans of Beitar who became politicians and devoted their time out of love, but there are many people who just used the club and wanted to be seen in the in the ground and in the stand, and supporting La Familia, the racist, the ultras, and including the Minister for Sport and Education. There's a famous clip of her standing in Beitar, and behind her a group of La Familia fans singing "May your village will be burned," referring to the Arab population of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think those politicians, the other kind, helped greatly to the demise of Beitar.
But why didn't as in when this was happening sort of strongly in the late 90s and early 2000s, why didn't Beitar fans kind of see through this, or did they see through it, but they didn't care in the same way that they're getting recognized and people are listening to them now?
That's one of the best questions I was asked so far. I can recall games in 1997 or 1998, standing there on the pitch, really down in the Teddy Stadium, and on the right of me there was the VIP stand, and half the government was the leaders of the army, celebrities, and everything. And some people felt that's not great. You know, we become fashionable and trendy, and some people.
And that also matters for a club which very much, sorry to cut across, but that matters for a club which very much paints itself as the outsider, as the underdog.
That's the great enigma of Beitar. How can they keep claiming it while being for a few times the richest and the club of the establishment? But they still, it didn't bother them, and don't bother them today. They will always claim that they are the underdogs, no matter how strong they are, which is ridiculous and typical of the Likud, and you may say typical of Israel as a whole. But one reason that most of their fans adores Netanyahu, and they saw it as a privilege to host him on the pitch and in the celebrations. And others feel the same about the racist agendas of those politicians I mentioned earlier. Only few dislike the way that the club was being used, but still it will happen again. Even if you look at the Twitter account of the Likud, they say "we Beitar" in some most ridiculous way, and you won't hear a squeak from Beitar. They're too frightened and they lost their identity as a independent football club. Let's say that.
You mentioned the far right fan group La Familia, which is very sort of, people will kind of know them as very synonymous with the club. Can you just explain briefly about what makes them different in terms of power or sort of gravitas to any other sort of supporter ultra group? Why are they so sort of able to shape the club to their whim in ways that other fan groups aren't really?
They got a foothold in around 2005 when Arkady Gaidamak, then the owner, allowed them into the stadium and to the stands in much more pronounced way. They are organized and they terrorize other fans who won't agree with the ideology. The main thing, they are very political. So they draw people, not just football fans, but people who identify with the racist ideas from all over Israel. Yeah. So a player of Beitar said that he don't mind playing with an Arab player in Beitar. So La Familia summoned him, and in less than 24 hours, he had to publish and apologize and says that the time is not right. So they call the shots in Beitar.
And so this incident is previous, before the big 2013 incident.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's constant battle, and when I wrote the book, they seem to lost their influence, and other owners and chairmen try to fight them, and many fans dislike them and object them. So I specifically wrote some of the fans, part of the fans, but they are the most vocal and important part of Beitar fanhood. And these days, nobody even bothered to fight them. They are part of the furniture, they are part of the stand, and nobody does to try to kick them out. So if had I wrote the book today, I think some parts were more blunt even.
Yeah. A lot of our listeners may have seen, as we have, the documentary Forever Pure, which covers in 2013 when the club signed two Muslim players at the behest of the Russian billionaire owner, and as a result, the La Familia kick off, and there's all sorts of instances after it. Did the club really not know that this was going to happen, given that the club had never had a Arab player before, and it was a calling sign of the fans that they would never have an Arab player? It's because watching the documentary the first time, what I was struck by always was how sort of taken aback by the lion in the cage that they were sharing with was now eating them.
That's the important milestone in the history of Beitar. There are some thoughts, and people, I spoke to the chairman at the time. Some people think that it was done to harm Beitar. I don't think so. I think Gaidamak was trying to save his business, and suffered greatly because of mismanagement and economic crisis. And he was trying to find ways into the Russian establishment, and the horrible, vile Chechen establishment as we see today is in Ukraine, was his way to get closer to Putin and his ilk. That was the idea behind it. I don't think he was sophisticated enough to say, I'll bring two Muslim players and that will sink Beitar down. No, I think he thought, I'll bring Chechen players and that will help me in the Russian upper circles. But when this mayhem broke and Beitar really actually never bounced back from that crisis, I don't think he was too sad. He was happy to leave the club and see its demise and stained forever until they will manage to establish a new Jerusalem there. But I can't see this scenario happening in the near future. But yeah, it was a decisive moment which made everything clearer. The focus was sharp, and the raison d'etre of Beitar was clearer, and the fight between the normal fans and the racist one. And unfortunately, it's clear to see who won that fight.
Do you think there's a way that situation could have been successful in bringing about a change to the makeup of Beitar, or was it always going to be end in that result?
I can quote Itzik Kornfein, the really outstanding, brave, and smart chairman of Beitar of the time, and a local hero, goalkeeper of the team. He said, without the support of the government, police, and court, it was bound to happen. We couldn't do anything on ourselves. So they were left to fight it on their own, and they lost comprehensively. Now the situation is clear. Unless Beitar will make a really bold move and sign Israeli Arab players, not just a Muslim player from around the world, but
Because they have since 2013 they have had like Muslim players, but not from the Arab world, correct?
I think they had one Ghanaian player and one non-Muslim players by the name of Ali Muhammad that some people took it as an offense, but they won that one battle and he was welcome to the team in the end.
Sorry, I don't know whether this is true or not, but is the story of the La Familia wanting him to change his name from Mohammed true, or is this just kind of a joke someone says?
No, it's true. He made it clear that he's Christian. And so they said, okay, we'll accept you, but we'll call you Sesk, not Ali or not Muhammad. And they became the laughing joke of Israeli football and Israeli society. The normal fans accepted him and welcomed him and made him feel like home, but in the end, he just wanted to leave the club, and he felt that he can't continue. And then he moved to Maccabi Haifa, the champions. He plays outstandingly in the Champions League against top teams in Europe, and Beitar are languishing in the last place in the league, maybe heading for relegation. So I think the lessons are very clear, and you can't be a successful team in Israel without, if you're not using 20% of the population or picking very few Muslim players from around the world. If you look at Israeli clubs and the Israeli national team, it's not an issue for them. All of them plays with Arab players and they are welcome and they play well. So Beitar are harming themselves, but that's the choice of La Familia. And until they,
How come, so after they signed the two Chechen Muslim players and La Familia burned down the clubhouse and have these huge protests and protest the team and unveil the banner with the Forever Pure, which makes them basically a persona non grata in terms of support or, companies wanted sponsorship. Why was this? Is it simply that this was too overt even for people who liked Beitar to stay with them? Why giving again my question, why was this the line for people, for them to become less
I'll say it bluntly. I'll be very Israeli, very blunt Israeli. It was Nazi. For any Israeli to see that Forever Pure, he knew without, immediately what they meant. And the Nazi reference was too hard to accept. Even if you don't like the Arab population, or even, if you got right-wing views of the situation and the conflict, it was a line was broken, and for sponsors, they ran away. One sponsor saw the banner, left the VIP stand, and left the managing director chasing him in the parking lot and told him that's the end of our sponsorship. I like you, I like Beitar, but I can't do business with you. And ever since, they find it hard to do business.
But to interrupt you, sorry, but that sponsor was probably at a match previously where they were chanting death to the Arabs or burn down the villages. Is that fair, or is that me being too critical?
No, I think it's, but thing became, you couldn't ignore them anymore.
Yeah.
That's the evolution of racism, or evolution of acceptance from it's becoming much and much radical and affecting the team more and more, until a certain point the feeling too strong and you can't ignore it anymore. And But yeah, it's a very good question. Why it didn't bother enough people before that? Why death to the Arabs was accepted by so many huge companies? We're talking the equivalent of BT or other giants. And how come a minister can stand among people who sing May Your Village Band and don't even try to shut them up or publish a, you know, publish a statement later that distance herself from it. So, but that's the story of Israeli society. It's getting in more and more racist, more and more hostile, while the population get more and more mixed, and you can't walk into a pharmacy in Tel Aviv and not meeting an Arab pharmacist or every.
And is that a result of Beitar making racism kind of, people see that it's so overt and stuff like this, and as a result, it's less of a taboo, and then it seeds into the society, or is it society just reflecting onto the football?
It's both, but Beitar, I'll be kind to Beitar. Let's say La Familia.
Yeah.
If you go to after a trauma or a terrorist incident, or even not that, into a local conflict between Israelis and Arabs, you will hear the same chants of La Familia. And it's not a coincidence. They are an inspiration. But as a whole, there are two different ways in which the Israeli society goes to. On one side, it's much more mixed. Jerusalem is an extremely mixed city between Arabs and Palestinians and Israelis, especially the big shopping mall just outside the stadium. On the other hand, the tension is getting higher and higher because it's getting much more mixed. So, and people and politicians can be overtly racist in a way which wasn't accepted in the 80s or 90s. And if you look at the Likud, which was kind of moderate right wing, it's now, you can call them radical. It's like the horrible right wing parties of Central Europe.
Yeah.
I'll be very cautious.
And is a part of that the influence of Beitar, or would that be overstating their
I think
importance to Likud?
There are many reasons, but yeah, Beitar and La Familia is an inspiration for the racists. And being associated with La Familia and helped some politicians who will star in the coming elections in November, and their fame was built, among other factors, on the stands of Beitar. So we can't, of course, there are huge reasons of the conflict and demographics and terror and suffering on both sides, but La Familia and the radical fans of Beitar do have an impact on Israeli society.
I read that some moderate fans of Beitar set up a Phoenix club to distance themselves from La Familia. Has that been successful, and has that played a part in some ways of Beitar's fall from grace, shall we say, in terms of standing in Israeli football? Or is it just a result of them being no one wanting to be tarnished with that image?
I think it was on the symbolic level. Some people maybe were inspired by that club, Beitar Nordia, and their ideas, but since then they got relegated into the fourth league again, which is really out of sight in Israel. And many fans found their way back to Beitar, despite Beitar not changing radically from the days of 2013. But still, I got huge respect to those people who established something from nothing against, waves of hatred and mockery from the Beitar fans, and they still support the new club through thick and thin, going to tiny grounds all along Israel and hoping for better days. And on the symbolic levels, they give, the right kind of ideas for football in Jerusalem, and hopefully it getting to the hearts and minds of young people, youth players, and young fans in Jerusalem. So drop by drop, they're doing their bit to help the situation, but it's a long way.
In some ways, for fans of other Israeli clubs, is it a point of pride when they have a number of Arab, Israeli, Muslim players on their team, because they can point that, and they know that it angers when they go to play Beitar, it angers their fans so much. In some ways, is having Beitar there more of a does it serve as a kind of, people can use it as a comparison and it's a point of pride for other fans that their club is not that way, or do they just ignore Beitar as a separate case?
No, I think you're right, and I can give the example of my club, Hapoel Be'er, and during our golden years we had big number of Arab players, and it wasn't an issue. They were just outstanding players. And now our top midfielder is an Arab from Jaffa, who scored 2 goals against Beitar in the 5-0 demolition of them earlier this season. And when he scored one of the goals, he pointed to his name on his back of his shirt, which is kind of cliche, but for some reason the Beitar fans found it unacceptable and tried to hit him and round into the ground. And then they were debating other fans that, it shouldn't allowed and it should have been red carded for something that every, Leo Messi does it at the Bernabeu. Every old firm has 5 of these gestures in one way or another. But this kind of sanctimonious, we are better than you because we got ideology is typical of Beitar and the right-wing politics of Israel. And we do love to stick it to them and see, look what you miss. And we on Twitter you see that kind of debate all the time, and people are proud. I don't think most fans of Hapoel Be'er are right wing as well. Be'er is a Likud city, but none of them have a problem with Arab players or having lots of Bedouin fans in the stands, as it should be.
Yeah. Since 2013, it seems that Beitar have had a number of, shall we say, unscrupulous, dodgy characters owning the club. From the crypto billionaire to this deal with the UAE prince, which they wanted to bring through. Is this kind of desperateness just solely because they are such a sort of, since this whole affair with La Familia in 2013, it kind of it's the persona non grata. You don't want to be associated as a business with them, and as a result, they're desperate for any kind of monetary input.
And there's you put it well, but there's another reason. Jerusalem, the city, drives people mad. It's a long phenomenon from biblical time, and I try to put it in my book, the legends and how thick is the air in Jerusalem with religion, politics, ideas of a grandeur and importance. And when unstable people, let's put it mildly, get into the job of owning Beitar, it goes extremely fast in their head, and they're beginning to think themselves as important ambassadors of the Jewish people, and they're living in constant connection with the fans, unlike any other club, on daily basis, on hourly basis. They never manage to distance themselves from the fans. And they hear that, and the mayor of Jerusalem tells them the same thing, and the fans tell them, you're not like any other club. You're the club of Israel, of the Jewish people, of the menorah, of the temple. All this kind of horrible nonsense, and they started to think themselves as the messiahs, and sooner or later they will lose touch with reality. It happened to many of them, and when in the first case, the people who are attracted to Beitar are not stable, and without great financial powers, it leads to a disaster after disaster after disaster. And it happened this summer. They were saved by, let's say, a dodgy deal that we don't know yet how kosher it is, that the Israeli FA approved, with their hand, not they approved, not in a happy and in an affirmative way. They said, we don't have any choices. Let's go with it and see what happens. And the UAA deal was probably the funniest one yet, when the previous owner said that he sold half of the club to a UAE royalty. And people were starting to think of, or fantasizing of, Beitar having Paris Saint-Germain owner, or any other of the Qatar, Dubai, Manchester City ownership.
I think I saw a lot of memes on Twitter with Beitar fans with chic dresses on and everything, which seemed to drive them particularly mad.
Yeah, and I think it lasted for 48 hours until the Israeli media did actually a very good job and found out that royalty, I'm pointing with my fingers like Dr. Evil, that royalty was extremely minor royalty, and most of his finance were a government bond of Venezuela, who were not a lot. So it didn't make the first hurdle, and yet again Beitar became a laughing stock of Israel. And then every few months the club, on official statements, said, we are proud to say that Mr. Malul, for example, has agreed to buy the club. And sometimes it took 1 hour for the media with Google to find out that it was just another weirdo without any money, who just making some kind of publicity for himself. So,
and is this just because they're so desperate for a savior to return them to glory days?
I don't think they're fantasizing of glory days. They just survival. But fantasize is the key verb here. They are desperate and in need for a stable and rich owner, just to get a few years back on the track before started dreaming about having any achievement. If we take a look at the current table, after 5 games they won. They got 3 points, and the goal difference is scored 4 and conceded 14, which is, it reflects the quality of the team pretty well.
And do they still retain that broad support across the country from fans, or since the success has dried up, has that support dried up too?
No, I think it dried up. Somebody from the inside told me they're not great anymore. Maccabi Haifa and Maccabi Tel Aviv are much bigger, much more supported, and much more richer. Hapoel Beersheva doing much better, and many of the fans ran away from the team in 2013. I cannot tell you how many people told me they were, truly Beitar fans, used to go every Saturday, and since the Chechen affair, they can't even watch the team on TV. They feel bereaved, and other fans don't like what's going on in the team. And again, many of the fair weather fans don't live in Jerusalem. So, and the team doesn't play on Shabbat, on Saturdays. So to make the journey to Jerusalem on Monday night, late, without trains, with horrible traffic, because Israel is so congested these days, sitting in 5 degrees and seeing Beitar fighting for survival yet again, it's not the recipe for full house. So yeah, people, the fans don't come as in big numbers anymore. So the atmosphere is bad. So you hear the racist and not the normative fans. So it's a very vicious cycle.
I was looking online before we started recording, and I was kind of slightly shocked to come across a picture, I think, from last week with the players all lined up with a La Familia banner.
Yeah.
Is that basically just a recognition that it is La Familia's club now, that they have won the war to speak over the kind of future of the club?
Let's sharpen it. The picture was taken in the first training session of the club, I think just after the new ownership was pronounced. So yeah, it's a clear declaration who's ruling the club, who's calling the shots, and don't you dare to ignore us or obey us or not obey us. So it's pretty shocking picture, and you can't ignore it. It's some of the fans can claim, and they spitting feathers against me and saying it's not all the fans, it's just part, and you're making things worse. But hey, look, the players and the
players are holding the banner.
Yeah, and the management allowed it. So you're nice people, you're not racist, but and maybe you're the majority of the fans, but you don't have any powers. The influential fans are La Familia, so unfortunately that's the case.
I'm guessing then you're not in any way optimistic for Beitar to depoliticize their message and kind of join with the rest of Israeli clubs in welcoming.
No, they need a strong ownership and somebody with money and vision, and they don't have it right now. Of course, things can change, but at the moment they looked pretty entangled in their ideology, and which led them to the place they are now. But yeah, you make your choices and you live by them.
To finish up, Shaul, what has been the reaction have you heard from Beitar fans or even fans of other Israeli clubs to you writing the book? What has been their reaction? Do they say, "Oh, you're wrong, don't tarnish us all with the same brush, we're not all racists"? Or do you even get "Yeah, we are racist, we're racist and proud" from some La Familia people say?
They haven't read the book, so
yeah.
It was
probably for the best.
Yeah, it was automatic reaction. They just said, "How dare you write a book in English when you live in London?" That's what I do in my life. I write journalism and books, and I live in London, so yeah, I don't have a problem. But on the other hand, we're saying in Hebrew, you don't judge a person in his grief. And holy moly, they got lots of grief in the last 10 years, and they will have much more. And we know football fans, we're all protective and aggressive when somebody says that our club is not the best in the world. So, okay, I wrote something about your club and you're not happy about it. It's fine. I'll take it. It comes with the territory. So I blocked all of them on Twitter. They blocked me back. Every 2 months there is another spate of spitted feathers against me, but okay, they call me anti-Semitic and whatever, and some people on the British left call me an agent of Zionist Hasbara. All right, I can live with that. I wrote my book. I hope people will find it fair, which is it's not objective or anything, and I didn't mean to tarnish anybody or to serve the Israeli, foreign office. But there is one point that I want to make. I think it's a very pro-Israeli football book. I think Israeli football over the years was a wonderful tool in bringing people together. As we can see in the national team, at the moment they're having a crisis, but we won't speak about. But over the years, it was a wonderful tool of bringing all kind of people, Israelis, Arab Israelis, foreign players and fans together, like most football clubs in the world. I think it helped British society getting better since the dark days of the 70s and the 80s. And so in that way, I love Israeli football, and I think it's much better than people give credit to it. And Beitar is the outsiders, and the results are pretty clear. If you work together with all parts of society, you can achieve a lot. But if you discriminate and choose not to use some of the best players in Israel and portray yourself as a political club and avoid your fans the 2 hours of the chance of having 2 hours without thinking about the bloody conflicts. I'm sure people in Ireland can understand what I'm talking about. You'll harm yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're a right-wing person or a lefty, sometimes you just want to go see your team playing with the best available players and enjoy yourself, or curse the day you were born to support that team, but still feel a connection with that team. And the same about the national team. And Beitar, not fighting those forces, are the exceptional. Hope it wasn't much of a lecture.
Yeah, no, it's all good, all good. Shaul, thank you so much for, like I said at the start, I really enjoyed reading the book. It was a topic I knew very little about, and I would definitely recommend for people to get stuck into it. Shaul, where can people get the book and also see more of your work? And is there another football book in the works?
I think Amazon or any other online shop is the first call. I wrote quite a lot to the Blizzard. Another article is coming on the next issue about something relative to our discussion. And I wrote a very big article that I feel connected to it about Hapoel Be'er Sheva and my personal story on The Guardian. So if you Google Shaul Adar, Hapoel Be'er Sheva Guardian, you will find more to read about it. And again, the Blizzard. I wrote many articles to this fine magazine. The next book, I'm not sure it's going to be football, maybe a travel one, but who knows?
Okay, who knows? All right. Thank you so much, Shaul. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I've learned a lot. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Alex.
Social Podcast Network.